On this episode of AV Week, the AV and IT marriage, as our buddy Frank Patakala says, taking a look at art and AV as an experience and the future of touchless in AV. All that and more next on AV Week.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AV Week, episode 535, recorded Thursday, November 18th, 2021. Behind the Duck.
Support for AVNation is brought to you by Crestron and by
Sennheiser. For over 75 years, Sennheiser has been a leader in pro audio and is now offering a wide variety of touchless and traditional audio solutions for both corporate and educational campus-wide audio.
This is AV Week, your weekly wrap-up of audiovisual news and information. My name is Tim Albright. I am your host. If you're here, we're recording this early because next week is Thanksgiving for us, and Tim's taking PTO for the first time in 10 years. So we're recording this on Thursday. With us, and I'll explain in a second, some interesting things. First and foremost, John Hinkle, the only man that I know personally that has an Emmy. He is from Netgear. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Good to see you again, Tim.
Good to see you. Also with us is my brother from another mother, who he and I started out in this world as tech managers, and now we're in opposite directions. Mr. Mike Brandis from QSC. Welcome, sir.
Good to be on. QSC has an Emmy for QSYS, but I myself do not own an Emmy.
You do not. Hinkle has it says John Hinkle.
We all want to be John Hinkle when we grow up.
Oh, if you really knew the details.
There are parts that we want to be.
Thank you.
When I reach John's age, I will have a bit more hair than he does currently.
I don't know. I wouldn't put that out into the atmosphere. And
I just my grandfather died at like 95 with a full head of hair, so I'm pretty confident in that.
You'll be good.
Couldn't grow a beard to save his life, but so that's the same. So as things would happen, first and foremost, we were supposed to have Becca Sullins on, who I absolutely love and adore. She was on a panel with me at Infocom. She has some little ones. And as little ones happen, accidents happen. So our best to her is she's going to get some stitches. The little one, not Becca. So God love her. So had a couple dropouts, and then Frank Patakala just has lost my number. Not really. We're recording this on Thursday. So Frank had to bail on that one. I do have a statement for him from the first story that we're doing, because we're doing AV and IT, quote unquote. AV and IT are like a married couple. You might hate each other, but you got to keep it at it for the kids. And that is quote unquote from Frank Patakala. So with that premise, here we go. Commercial integrator. Jonathan Blackwood, actually one of the last articles he wrote before he exited stage left of Com Integrator, and we'll talk about that in a second. Jonathan writes about the fact that, the dreaded word convergence, which I think reared its ugly head sometime around 2001, 2002 in the AV world. It's occurred. It's happened. More accurately, that intersection between AV and IT has happened, quote unquote, for much equipment, so much equipment, and many systems. The two are inexorably linked. Now, I didn't choose the story when I realized that Hinkle was on. I actually already chose the story, but this kind of works out nicely, and especially with Brandis being here and QSC. John, we'll start with you. You got hired by Netgear because of the AV-IT convergence. They identified the fact that the AV space is important, especially for a switch manufacturer. So talk about, is Frank right? Is it a married couple who are going through, the throes of divorce, but they have to stay together because of the kids? And I guess we're the kids in this. Or is it something different? Is it something deeper?
Well, I think there's certainly a touch of that. And yes, I think it's a credit to Netgear for hiring some AV folks like myself and some others to really understand the marketplace. Because it shows right there's a difference in what the IT people know and what the AV people know. I think, first of all, I've learned from a couple of years here from Laurent, my good friend and the product line manager for our managed switches, that you really shouldn't converge them. So let's talk less about convergence and more about just they need to interop together, right? So not everything should be on the same network as IT. And all these things lead into the discussion of like, okay, well, why not? Why shouldn't they? Well, you need to understand IT, and the IT people need to understand AV. So from an IT standpoint, that IT network is already oversubscribed. It's the way it works, the way it's set up. So it doesn't matter if your email takes a couple of moments to send, it's going to send eventually. But that matters if we're having a podcast or if you're on the air with somebody, a Zoom call. So those things are the reasons why you want to create a separate AV network. Ensure the controllers for AV can be on the IT network, because you've got to manage your network, manage your AV network, and that can be remote. But not everything on the AV network needs to have internet connectivity, for one thing. And also, you want to make sure it's just separated and controlled in its own little environment, not only using VLANs and things like that. But I think it's less of a converging them both together and more making sure they interoperate. And then we can talk about some other stuff. There's a lot of good things, a lot of good points in that article that are raised.
All right. Mike, I mentioned the fact that it was just serendipitous that you're here as well. QSC has made no bones about the fact that they are going down the IT road. Talk for a second about that realization, that strategic decision, and where not just QSC, but also Mike Brandis sees this space going.
So first, I'm going to respond to the gentleman from New Jersey and his quote. IT and AV
He's
are
from
like
Long
a
Island.
marriage.
He is from Long Island. Time out.
Oh,
He's Long Island.
Long Island. I apologize
Yes,
to the entire state of New Jersey.
I do not want to get emails. Long Island is not New Jersey. All right, continue.
Notwithstanding, it is like a marriage, and like every marriage, right? Different strokes for different folks. Some folks do want their networks converged. Some folks do want to have a network where they run their real-time audio and video systems on the same flat network that they run their telephones, printers, desktop, right? And there's exactly the people that John just described that want two completely different networks, want to tie them together maybe through a control element, so people on a corporate network accessing the internet can reach their control system. So there's no, like with everything in the AV industry, we can all have our firm opinions, but there's no right or wrong way to do things. Short of if your packets get where they need to go in the time you need them, you're doing it correctly, whether it's with a separate network or whether it's with a converged network. And at QSC, we have a number of customers that are running everything on the same network. We pride ourselves in being able to run on your network. Proper QoS, proper IGP management, notwithstanding. It's nothing that is prohibitive to running other signals around. No jumbo frames, none of those type things that are unique to just audio or video transport. So that's a bucket there. The second one is, why would we, AV in the corporate space especially needs to be closer aligned to IT than in any other space. It's completely different for digital signage, installation, and some AV over IP in a casino where there might be 3 or 4 network access points for people to hop on, right? That's a different level of convergence than I have an office building with 600 desktop workstations, 600 phones, 20 printers, and 6 conference rooms, right? So when we talk about IT and AV being the same, right, that's a lot more in the corporate space than it is in the non-corporate space. I think there's a different level of AV and IT when you think about themed entertainment applications and things like that. The most strenuous area in which they converge should always be the target, because you can back off from there. You don't have to start trying to make it work in a really light IT environment and then ultimately shooting behind the duck when it comes to your corporate infrastructure. So that's kind of one of the big differences for a company like QSC. We want to develop products, we want to develop solutions, we want to develop professional services that allow people to choose the network infrastructure they want, instead of coming in off the bat and saying, you're going to do it our way or you can't do it. The people writing the checks usually get to make the decisions. So that's kind of the QSC mindset. And, for me personally, I ran an AV department at a university, which was part of the IT department. And at that time, 8 years ago, when we were starting to talk about convergence, God, it's been 8 years, it was, I'll put this hub so that way I can get a network connection to my insert push button panel so I can pull it up on rudimentary network monitoring and management. I'm trying not to throw out product lines and manufacturer names. And the IT department was already having a stroke about that, right? And now here we are, some number of years later, I think we decided it was 8, And, we're talking about putting, 750, 800 megabit per second network video streams on the same network that everything else is running on, and really having the tools in the AV product lines and through, switches that like Netgear provide and QSE resells to really manage all that efficiently, right? There's no manual packet shaping. You just insert your QoS values and, at this point, if you're running your network stack strictly, it should just work. Right, so
I want to point something out there that Brandon said, and he and I really have known each other for 10 years. I mean, we really were both tech managers at the time. He worked for an IT department 10 years ago. He was one of the first people that I knew that did, right? So 10, 15 years ago, we still had separate departments, and Mike was, and the folks in West Palm were one of the first to really kind of bring the AV folks underneath. And he and I had separate experiences. Our college, the IT folks were a little bit more forward thinking, and they basically gave me a block of IP addresses every summer and said, "Here, go have fun, and here's your VLAN, and don't screw up anything, and don't let in any hackers." And we didn't, right? And I learned an awful lot that way. Obviously, Brandis had learned his stuff, a different way. But I liked how this is going with.
And I will say it eventually did settle in once, it was understood. Once the white papers were out saying the ports were opening, this is what we're doing, right? A lot of this is, product side, but a lot of it is also documentation side and explaining to people that have a very focused view, not narrow, but very focused and deep view of, IT protocols, networking protocols, cybersecurity things like that. Exactly what it is you're doing. I think with knowledge comes acceptance. It's not this just giant black box that's a vulnerability on my network, right? It's these ports, blah, 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 blah. And QSE, again, going down the IT path, has published a lot of information about not only, port access and things like that, but, realistically, like, of all the technology we use, are there any vulnerabilities out there? And all that stuff's available, on our website for anyone to go poke around. And so that's kind of an upfront kind of push on our end to say, okay, we're going to give you as much information as you can to make this choice a lot easier down the road.
Something the article brings out too, a lot of is talking about education and training. A lot of companies had their IT specialist, and there's that one guy who's got to go to every installation and figure out how to set everything up and make it work. But it's better now, as the article points out, to have a broader range of people who are trained with some of the basic concepts of AV over IP for IT. So you do need to make sure people can speak to the IT department. And it sounds like in Brandis' case, he was an IT guy, or maybe he was an AV guy first, but he learned all the IT concepts. And that's important. There's a lot of places you can go for some of this stuff. Netgear has its own academy for learning some basics and some little more advanced concepts. There's tons of other training out there. AVWeek Academy, even if you aren't doing AVWeek, has some really good courses on that stuff. But that's the important thing that the AV teams need to know is what the heck are they doing? When they plug in that switch to the network, what's happening? What's going to happen out there? And that's where I think Netgear's done a good job as well by taking IGMP and revamping it, saying, look, IGMP is great. You got to have it for multicast, but it wasn't built to be as practical as it needs to be. So we changed it and make sure that when you plug a Netgear switch in, it's the AV line switches. It's not going to flood your network. Little things like that go a long way to the IT department. So they know that you're not going to plug in and just take the network down. So I think that helps a lot. And the more that AV people can understand what's behind all this versus just accepting it, then they'll be better to be able to communicate with the IT department.
And let's just be clear, taking the network down is a bad thing. Okay?
Bad thing.
Just in case you need a baseline of education, taking the network down is bad.
It's a forced break from email, and it's fine.
Well, yes, well, there's that. Thanks so much for watching this first segment of AV Week. To check out the rest of the episode for free, click on the link below or go by the website, avnation.tv. That's avnation.tv.